as Africans, we love oral history. We love listening to stories, right? So if all these traditional healers could come together, form an association of traditional healing, yeah,
Right.
form
And record their knowledge.
record the knowledge. Listen, if you're a traditional healer, I'm giving you ideas right here.
What's behind these practices? Because they can be around health, but some of them are just based on like beliefs, whether it's just religious or just based on oral tradition.
Peer pressure from the ancestors.
Hello, Globies. Welcome to the World Health Investigation podcast. My name is Jocelyn.
I'm Edna.
And I'm Loza.
We're three young global health professionals and your hosts for the World Health Investigation podcast,
Also known as the WHI, and we'll be discussing all things global health and unpacking the most controversial social and health issues,
as well as promoting new age global health development and equity.
So, ladies, what's the tea in global health today?
The tea in global health today is herbal tea.
Flat tummy tea.
We went past that episode. We're not coming back.
Oh, sorry, just kidding.
Please. What's the tea?
Imagine.
Yeah, guys, today we want to talk about traditional medicine.
Traditional. So we're doing witchcraft.
Huh?
Who said that?
We're doing witchcraft.
Who said that?
Oh, we're here
No.
to do news.
Oh.
Finally, this is the episode I've been waiting for. We can finally...
Please don't listen to her. She's sick right now.
Okay. In fact, before we begin, let's put a disclaimer on this episode.
Yeah, actually.
We're going to be talking about herbal medicines. We're going to be talking about drugs, different medical products. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to, remind you all that we are not healthcare professionals.
I'm not a doctor.
Loza?
I'm not a doctor.
Those
nurse.
Not a doctor. I'm sorry. I can be your personal global health doctor, but not your...
I don't like the way you are saying that.
It sounds suspicious.
Suspicious.
For me, for advice.
Yeah, guys, we just want to remind you all that if you're ever considering taking any sort of medical, anything, any drugs, any herbs or whatever, it's always worth it to actually speak with a trained professional before you.
Yeah, that sounds nice. I'll come to us.
Hey. No.
As I said, ignore her.
Not. Anyway, guys.
All right, let's get into it.
And before really diving in, I just want to know already off the bat, when you think about traditional medicine, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Just already know it's juju.
Yeah.
I want to talk about juju. Can we not talk about that today?
No, some people have lost their hinges and their marbles
already.
And we're only beginning. I mean, traditional medicine, the way it's been taught to me or it's being described is any medical practice that is not done by the whites.
Oh.
So everything else, the alternatives, the herbals and the others, as you said. Yeah, whatever the white people don't do.
Mm-hmm.
So the African practices, the Asian practices, the South American, indigenous, all traditional. Non-white is how I have been taught it. Yes.
Yeah.
Jocelyn?
All jokes aside from witchcraft, I was joking. More seriously, I grew up in Cameroon, grew up in Tanzania. So when I think traditional medicine, I think of cultural medicine. I think of medicine done within, rural areas or practices done for the prevention and cure of different health conditions, but within communities that value certain traditions and cultures, particular traditions and cultures.
Yeah, I love everything that you guys have said there. I would also think of similar things. To me, literally in my head, when I think traditional medicine, I picture a traditional healer.
Yeah.
But just, they have their herbs there. They're just doing something here.
And they say, here, take this.
Calling upon the ancestors, calling upon the vibrations and the
Anyway.
But yeah, and it's definitely like Johnson. I like that you brought up like more like in rural communities and stuff like that, because I don't
Yeah.
consider it in like our hospital or anything like that in a doctor's office.
No.
But yeah, how do we even define traditional medicine? That is a key challenge, ladies and
Right.
I will start with like the WHO definition, and then we can discuss how we feel about that.
Mm-hmm.
So for the peoples, the WHO defines traditional medicine as the sum total of the knowledge, skill, and practices based on the theories, beliefs, and experiences indigenous to different cultures, whether explicable or not, used in the maintenance of health as well in the prevention, diagnosis, improvement, or treatment of physical and mental illness.
Wait, pardon. Whether explicable or not, did I hear?
It said,
Also picked up on that. It's a
yeah,
long definition, guys, which
it's a paragraph.
it's
Let
a
me
whole
sip on my tea.
Whether explicable or not,
Yeah.
whether it's real or not.
Explicate it to me. You explicate it to me today.
Yeah, like what do you guys like understand by that? Because that also stood out to me, whether it's explicable or not. Because I'm like, that can be a lot of different things in the world. That is like there's explanations or there's no explanations.
Mm-hmm. And there are medicines that are not within traditional health that are explicable or not. But we don't apply the same definition to them. Like
those traditional medicines.
Hmm?
I said we don't call those traditional.
Exactly. Like we call that modern medicine. But again, it goes back to what I said. To me, the way they look at traditional health, they said indigenous practices. They said, it's for the ethnics.
If you haven't watched our previous episodes, please go back to our decolonizing global health.
It always comes back to it.
It always comes down to it. You can clearly see that there's still some colonial tendencies in almost everything. You're just minding your business. You just hear things like this. Even in traditional medicine, such a simple, beautiful cultural aspect of medicine, explicable or not. Let's unpack that. Can we just unpack that for like 1 minute? What does that mean?
What does that mean? Because like Loza brought up, like even in modern medicine today, there's even a whole branch of pharmacology. They call it evidence-based medicine. And what that thing is they are drugs that are like manufactured and produced, but then they use them for a certain disease and they're like, okay, what we're seeing is when we use this drug for this disease, it's improving people's health outcomes. Like we can measure that. But we don't know why it's doing it and how it's doing it. We just know it's working. And the thing is, some of these are actually used by doctors. They will tell their patients, like, listen, we have all these papers and research showing that if I give you this drug for this illness, it could actually help you, but I cannot tell you how or why.
Exactly. And I mean, you guys will be surprised, but even simple paracetamol, the mechanism of action is argued. Like people are still fighting about where does it act, but it works. So I mean, do we talk about that as traditional? Is paracetamol traditional medicine?
Is paracetamol traditional medicine?
It's we by now we know that there's a lot in science that we don't know. Are we going to call the whole science methodology as well as medicine traditional? If you're a healthcare professional or you are working in health or studying health, you understand that there's a lot we don't know. The more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know.
Yeah.
So are we now going to call it traditional?
Are we going to say whether it's applicable or not?
Whether it's likable or not. That's going to be my new caption.
Or not.
I am me, whether explicable or not.
I love that. Yeah. And I think you guys like bring up an excellent point. And that's why I wanted like to remind us, let's say, if we start by thinking about examples that are typically given, you hear that like, okay, traditional medicine sometimes would be called like folk medicine, sometimes it would be called like indigenous medicine, sometimes it's under the umbrella of alternative whatever, but it's all, I think Loza, you are onto something of this of like, it's more like the ethnic things. And the examples that I was coming across as I was reading around is like, oh, traditional Chinese medicine, or traditional African medicine, Ayurveda, and Ayurveda. And for those that don't know, Ayurveda is basically like a whole range of like health practices that originated from India. Like they're like 3,000 years old. So it's a really long one, but it's again typical examples given for traditional medicine.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can already see how
you can already
big the umbrella is.
Or that umbrella.
It's directed.
Yeah. I'll say I did come across a definition that I wanted to run by you guys. Or just a quote rather. This came from the American Medical Association. And they said there is no alternative medicine. There's only scientifically proven, evidence-based medicine supported by solid data or unproven medicine for which scientific evidence is lacking. So in essence, they're saying, let's not get too fussed about what we call who and what. There's medicine that we have the scientific evidence, we've done our normal scientific things to prove it and have evidence for it. And then we have things, medicines or not, whatever you call them, where there's really no scientific proof or little scientific proof.
Yeah.
You guys think that's a much more helpful like way to approach things?
100%.
I mean, that was 100% my opinion. A little bit ago, I would say, yeah, there's proven medicine and unproven. But when you even look at this definition, it says, okay, to the scientific method generally designed by Europe, right? So even the validation process neglects a whole side of medicine that might work, but they say there's no scientific evidence, so let's ignore it. And that's what I agreed with. But as I kind of decolonized my mind and really started looking at things a little deeper, now I'm thinking maybe there are other better ways to validate medicines and more inclusive ways, and not necessarily disregarding a whole chunk of medical practices because they don't fit a scientific method.
Yeah.
Very recent belief.
Those are, I remember us having this conversation like last year. And this makes me think, I think being scientific can mean so many different things. Obviously, in the West, it doesn't. It means one thing. It means it's a westernized, proven method.
Yeah.
But I am really, 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 like, I vouch for this. And I really say, I think that the scientific method can have so many different approaches that are inclusive. For example, let's look into randomized controlled trials, right?
The golden standard.
The golden standard. We've heard about them. We've seen the if you haven't. Basically, it's a standard or method that, well, you recruit patients into your trial or your study, and you have one group with a placebo, which is like maybe like which does nothing to the body, and then you have another group that actually has the treatment, and then you randomly assign them and nobody knows who is who, and you kind of make sure that the doctors and the patients, nobody knows, which is blinding, which is like this blinding system, right? That's a randomized controlled trial that has been used in a very standard way, but as years have passed, scientists have noticed that it's not effective. It's very difficult for you to fully understand the effectiveness and the side effects, and also the whole aspect of holistic medicine based on having random versus control alone, right? Now there's this whole other theory known as the realist RCT, a realist randomized controlled trial, which means that you try to incorporate different factors into your study. So you incorporate things like beliefs, you incorporate things like social factors, medical history. So basically you ask the patients different questions. Obviously it would be a different person with no interest, with no conflicts of interest that would do this, but it's a much more
holistic approach. Yeah,
a holistic and inclusive approach to approach things. And it's a step forward.
Is it really practiced a lot? Because
It's
Like it's so good, but I've never seen a paper like that, and none of my professors have mentioned that. So
that's,
it's like
I learned it when studying my
so new.
master's. I
Yeah.
learned it. So it's not a con, but these the realist theory kind of criticized the traditional the standard RCT and said, okay, it's not enough. You need more. Obviously, that's one technique, and there's so many other things that
Right.
people are starting to think. Sociologists are
That's
starting
good.
to think, and they're starting to ask themselves, like, if we're doing these methods, we're going through so many phases. We're going through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Your drug's not getting approved, going through RCTs back and forth. You're going through 10, 20 years, still no approval. Maybe the method is not always working. So you have to think outside the box, right? And then I'm going to get into more detail about how I've seen some Africans do it, but I want to know what you guys think.
Yeah, no, 100% there with you both. Yeah, and I like what you've brought up here in terms of, I read around a lot and you see that some of the efforts going around to understand traditional medicine, usually from the Western perspective, brought up, is like, yeah, let's look into acupuncture. Let's do a clinical trial on acupuncture. Like as Jocelyn explained, we have our group that doesn't get acupuncture. We have our group that gets acupuncture. We compare, like, the traditional way of approaching, like how to study the effect of something.
Yeah.
But you're using it on something, you're using Western methods on something that is not very Western.
Not Western.
And
Yeah.
I always wonder if it's actually going to capture everything. And I like what you brought up about the realist RCT, because I do wonder, let's say if I was going to look into a herbal medicine, I would start to wonder as well, like, okay, obviously when someone in their culture uses this herbal medicine, this medicinal plant, they don't just use it on its own. The traditional healer could be like, but also make sure you are meditating, also make sure you do all these different things. So is it like all these different things acting together that produce then a better health outcome? Or is it just that medicinal plant? We don't know. Does the study include all of those different factors? We don't know. So that's why I also wonder.
Right. Yeah. I think that's ultimately with this quote. Yeah, I could agree with it, depending on what they say. I mean, depending on what they mean with scientific evidence.
Yeah.
The reason why I agree with the quote is because it says there's no alternative medicine. That I agree with. There's no alternative medicine. And it says that it has to be scientifically proven. Now, my understanding of that is completely different. Maybe somebody else, a different scientist with a Western background, may say, yeah, our method. But I understood it as scientifically proven can mean different things in different countries. Science exists everywhere. Science exists in Africa and Asia, in Australia, in Antarctica, everywhere. So whatever that means for your country, that's different.
Yeah. And that brings me to my next point, right? Which is about what it means in different countries. Obviously, one approach that has been that they're trying out in terms of like, okay, how can we incorporate traditional medicine into our more conventional, like, modern medicine, all these things, is like, okay, let's actually regulate them in some way. Let's include them as part of like our medication that we prescribe to people, whatever. And so that brings me to like herbal medicine. That's a huge part of traditional medicine, isn't it? Anywhere in the world, there's some maybe like plants or whatever that we use when we give people. So sometimes the definition, again, it's just a definition as a guide, but it's not one we have to go with. You can disagree with it. Is, these are products made from botanicals or plants that are used to treat disease or maintain health. So usually they will be sold as like tablets, capsules, powders, teas, and they can be fresh or dried plants. But the thing is, in many places, if you want something to be sold as under this category of herbal medicine, it doesn't necessarily have to go through, like we're talking, these rigorous, randomized controlled trials. They don't have to go through different regulatory things. But the thing is, again, that also varies in different countries. So I was reading about this study where they were comparing the UK, Germany, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. And essentially, in the UK, Germany, UAE, and Kuwait, herbal medicines, they still need to provide some kind of evidence of like safety and efficacy. So they could be asked to provide like toxicological reports. They could be asked to, show that, okay, this is traditional because it's been used for 30 years or more. And those, some of those years have to be, for example, in Europe.
Mhm.
So that's how they can go about it. But in the USA, for example, they usually treat herbal medicines as like dietary supplements.
Right.
Something is under a dietary supplement, they basically don't even really need to submit anything for safety
Yeah.
or efficacy.
Yeah.
And that's the issue there.
But then, like, would you go, if you're in the US, would you go for a dietary supplement if you have an issue?
Me personally?
Speak honestly, would you, they told you, okay, you could either go to the doctor or somebody comes and tells you, oh, I know this dietary supplement you can take. What would you?
Going to the doctor.
Unless it's one I already know of, like let's say they're like, oh, take eucalyptus or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Green tea, drink some peppermint.
Some ginger.
Ginger. You're not like, yeah, that's
okay. But yeah, some I'm not familiar with. I don't know, part of me thinks they don't go through this much regulation because they believe it doesn't do anything anyway. And so it doesn't require too much regulation, but it could still have, I don't know, a mechanism of action that we don't know about, and it might mess me up. So I wouldn't experiment too much.
To be completely honest, this may sound controversial,
Mm-hmm.
but if I'm in the US, I may not. But if I'm in Cameroon, I would.
I can see.
I would. Because, I don't know, there's a certain level of trust you have within your community. Like if my mom tells me, let's say, I remember when I had, perfect example. I remember when I had varicella zoster, my whole body was itching. And
you have to say it in that like that.
Why do you define it for people, please?
You have to say I had varicella zoster in my cells.
Girl, me, I had to calculate. I was like, what's that again?
Varicella zoster entered my body. Varicella zoster decided to invade my whole being. Anyways, chicken pox, guys. I remember being so like there's nothing you can take, right? I don't know.
I mean,
not
really, just suffer through it.
Yeah.
I was telling her, like, I want to go to the doctor. She was like, I said you're gonna wash yourself with these leaves, or else you're not going anywhere, right? Yeah. So I was washing myself with those leaves, and she bathed me in those leaves. I was very stubborn, but she did it anyways, and it went straight away. So I kind of, through that, I've kind of learned that when your mom advises you something, it's not because she has done it, her grandma has done it, her aunties have done it, her sisters have done it, and it's worked for them.
Yeah, they've seen it.
There are times, there are exceptions.
Yeah.
1%. I'm like, 1%, but like most of the time, there's this element of community trust. So if I was in Cameroon and someone told me, listen, I took this, I'm gonna look out for you, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
I can see that from someone you trust. I think for me, it was a no for the US if I just saw it in a supermarket. Came to do something versus, and I have a problem, I'm gonna go to the doctor because I don't know who made this. I don't know who packaged this. I don't know who's telling me anything. Exactly. But when there is that community of trust and there's generational knowledge that's been passed down so many times and they've seen it worked, maybe it's worth a try.
Yeah. What's interesting there was like, the WHO actually, they estimate that in some Asian and African countries, up to 80% of the population relies on traditional medicine for their primary care. And
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's why, Jocelyn, I think in terms of that community trust, I would also have a similar approach of like, I understand that it's a huge part of where I come from, the traditional medicine. So there's part of me that's like, it's not like complete nonsense.
No,
not complete nonsense. And I do have a certain level of trust in terms of like, I know that in our culture, oral history is a very important thing, So yes, I have been like facing an issue. I'm just walking around. I see, those ladies that just sit by the corner and they're just selling tomatoes or something. I don't know. And then they're like, oh, okay, you're facing that. They're like, oh yeah, you could try this, take some hot water, put this and that in it, and then just rub it on your leg there and that, and it should help you. And I'm like, oh, okay, look, I might actually try that. Why not?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, in Cameroon, I know we're blessed with medicines and just different herbal products, right? Like even stretch marks. You use cocoa butter to remove the stretch marks. From even like with COVID and stuff. I remember when I had COVID, my mom told me, get aloe vera. Aloe vera, get the aloe vera juice and put some honey, put some lemon. And I took it, and in let's say 2 minutes, I was fine. So just that's something that when I went to the hospital, I didn't get anything aside from self-isolate. So there's so many I could name so many examples of when traditional or herbal medicine has helped me. So yeah, for that, you can't refute it. You really can't.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I would just, I'd like to remind us all that, like, even a lot of the medication that we take nowadays that's more like sold, over the counter, these drugs that are manufactured by pharmaceutical companies, they also started as like herbal medicines.
Mhm.
And the example that most people are probably familiar with is aspirin. It was usually the story you hear is like, ancient Egyptians, they used to use it for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Just take it from willow bark and then you drink it in a tea or something. And the thing with aspirin is like the active ingredient that we know now that actually helps with like reducing inflammation and pain is salicylic acid, right? Mm-hmm. But over time, in the 18th century or whatever, modernizing manufacturing, they made a synthetic version of it. And, that's why it's like no longer not like, derived from the plant directly.
Yeah.
Now just like, in a pill form.
Yeah.
Just to say that, some of these things also started in the category of like herbal medicines, but have also over time evolved into just now the more formal version.
Yeah. I think the one benefit I can say of it at least is controlling dosage. I think that's one edge that, and that's what I would like for a lot of like the traditional medicines, at least to have a process of at least to make them more legit, is to just have dosing controlled and like understanding how much it works for different people. I think that's the one edge that pharmaceutical practices have.
Yeah,
I agree.
I completely agree as well.
No.
And yeah, this is where like I like bringing in the historical components and like the colonization that Jocelyn pointed out earlier.
I'd like to get into that, please. Yeah.
Yeah, Loza, as we were like talking earlier on, it's like obviously a lot of like modern medicine comes from the West, and the West has been able to like I said, go from herbal medicine type of things, and over time they have like evolved and like formalized things in their own way. But has everyone had the opportunity to do that?
Right, exactly. And I think one thing people need to realize is when Europe basically colonized the world, they also colonized information. They controlled information and like systems of knowledge that people had. So then even if there's generations of information, they've kind of convinced themselves that their method and their thinking is superior to everybody else's. And now we must all adapt.
Yeah, that's kind of why I think we have to be careful about what we say, or when we say that that traditional medicine needs to be regulated. We need to kind of make sure that it doesn't dive or go into the same path that the Western countries did, right? We could really find that for ourselves. As I'm speaking as an African woman, obviously that means different things for like Chinese medicine, acupuncture and stuff like that, right? So I'm thinking, at the end that you mentioned earlier, oral history, beautiful. I had this idea, like literally, I told us last summer, where as Africans, we love oral history. We love listening to stories, right? So if all these traditional healers could come together, form an association of traditional healing, form
and record their knowledge.
Record the knowledge, pass on to you. You can have different recordings. You could count how many recordings you have, count how many patients come. Listen, if you're a traditional healer, I'm giving you ideas right here. Credit.
What you calling on them? You said hello.
Hello. Listening. Or if you think about it. Get people to listen. People will listen. A lot of rural people in rural areas, they have, if they don't have TV, they don't have phones, they will have a radio. They will have something to listen to. That's why we have this podcast as well. But anyways, they will have a radio show. They love radio shows. So think about finding ways to reach out to those people and finding a way to standardize and structure what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think now I feel like we have to catch up on years of information that's been lost or suppressed.
Yeah. And it's not just like, 5 years or something. It's like
Yes, hundreds of years.
hundreds of years. But Jocelyn, I'll just take this opportunity. I think you mentioned like, ways we can go about to actually like incorporate like traditional healers, and the way they approach medicine and all these things. And just to point out this study that I came across where they actually were trying to just like examine attitudes from traditional healers in South Africa, around how they would feel about like, let's say, sharing patient information or like, having some sort of record of, the medicine that they practice with their different patients. So when they looked at, or when they asked 178 of the participants in the questionnaire, about like 72.5% of them said that they are willing to introduce some kind of documentation into their practice. Like we're talking about, a lot of the times our practices involve like oral history and all these different things, and that can be lost. We have our history where some of our own knowledge systems were also destroyed. So do you guys think it's a good approach to actually try document patient information in some way so it's shared between the traditional healers and maybe the more formal like healthcare professionals? Jocelyn does not look impressed.
Sorry, I can't.
Yeah, no.
I really don't know how to hide my facial expressions.
I was looking at her. I said, at least pretend to smile.
You know what I mean? She didn't even pretend like,
Thank you for trying. How do I say this in a nice way?
An attempt was made.
Yeah, we acknowledged, we're putting effort. We are putting effort.
Mm-hmm.
But it still gives me like, okay, let me just watch a show. Let me watch you guys. Let me watch see you guys do it, and yeah, see if it turns out well. Okay, I get it. If you want to find a way to communicate with the healers and stay in connection with them, that's fine. How about maybe you could train them on some of your scientific methods and vice versa. It has to be an interchange.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this whole, we give.
Yeah, we're going to tell them our way because it's right.
No. How about you have an exchange? They tell you what they do and how they work, and you tell them about your methods, and then they can see what you guys like. See if you like each other or if you like it, but not this whole, let me sit down and watch.
It's like
hell.
It's giving National Geographic. I don't know, like why are they sitting there just observing attitudes? I don't know. I just it doesn't sit well with me, kind of a European institution coming in just watching. So
that if it goes wrong, it'll be like, these Africans just tried to do some traditional healing and it went absolutely wrong. So that's why they like to tend to report the bad stuff, the things that go wrong. So I think even if that happens, there needs to be equal representation.
Yeah, or at least if there's observation, I would like it to be ourselves observing ourselves.
Yes. Right, that's what I mean. And like to clarify, this study wasn't about just observing what traditional healers do. It was literally just to ask traditional healers if they would be willing to have some sort of system of like just recording in whatever way, recording what they do. Patient information.
Wait, I think we hear that part correctly. Patient information.
Patient information.
Like history and stuff.
Like to say, okay, this patient came to me, they were complaining about ABCD. I suggested that they take this herbal medicine. I suggested that they do XYZ, they sleep more, and then I sent them off. Like if that's what the traditional healer did, that's such a bad thing to like try record it somehow.
It's not the worst thing. I think it just is about intentions and
I agree. I understand it may have good intentions there, but it could turn into something completely different, especially with the consent, especially with the language. I think there's so many different languages now.
Languages, the method of recording, is it going to be the same as it's done here? Can they, is that going to be their chosen method? I think I like what you said of Justin, like normally in a lot of countries, it's oral traditions. So continuing with that, because that was the system that existed, instead of introducing a new European way of recording patient history, for example.
Yeah, and also
it's an okay start.
Another thing that comes to my mind, this thing about medical information and how it's being dispersed. Like if you're collecting patient information, it's very important that the people that are using that information need that information, and that what they're using the information for is being used for that particular reason. If you're just distributing information about patients just because, oh, somebody said, oh, I want to see how the traditional medicine works, it doesn't, it there's some ethical concerns there. There's some major ethical concerns, because if I don't think that patient information should be distributed anyhow. And this again is also against scientific method, so we have to think about this very, very carefully.
Yeah, but do you guys think that, I think Justin, you pointed this out, there could be some value in getting these two groups to talk in terms of traditional healers and our more like modern, or not modern, but like our normal conventional,
conventional,
like medical professionals. Like we have electronic health records, traditional healers, maybe they use oral tradition, whatever they use to record information. Like, is there some value, like you said, in having those two groups talk?
Absolutely. I think that the conventional scientific method has gotten us so far. Like, I can't criticize it as much. Well, there's so much.
We're scientists at the end of the day. Like,
there's so much that has been achieved
through
conventional medicine. So it's almost like there's so many more advancements that could also be done. And if they take the time to look into rare medicine, rare traditional medicine, maybe you may find a cure to so many things that you never even could think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's where my thing is. I think, like, conventional medicine, it's the golden standard right now. It has gotten us so far. It is undeniable that, life expectancies are getting longer, people are healthier, but it doesn't have everything we need right now. I mean, there's still a lot of gaps, and I think there's a lot to gain from traditional or alternative medicine. I think there's a lot of information there that could actually help, and I think an exchange between the two can benefit like everyone involved. Even, as you said, there's 80% of people that rely only on traditional medicine. They can have a lot to benefit from the introduction of, conventional medicine, and vice versa. Like, a lot of people that are using conventional medicine, we could have a lot of things to benefit from, like the knowledge that is carried within traditional medicine.
Yeah, and that just made me think again. In Cameroon particularly, I know that a lot of traditional, this is something I didn't know before, but I recently found out that a lot of these traditional healers have degrees. Many, quite a few actually, have degrees, but they ended up unemployed. Ended up unemployed.
Not expected.
So, for example, there's this antiviral called Hepazor, and it treats viral hepatitis. And it's from this plant-based called, I think it's called Enantia. I don't know the full name, but Enantia something. And the way it has been approved. It was a traditional medicine that ended up being approved by the Cameroonian Ministry of Public Health, and it had, it worked effectively, right? But one thing that I can say is that a lot of the traditional healers that are in Cameroon either did a degree in biomedical sciences, medical sciences, but ended up unemployed for 5 years and started, okay, let me start my own practice, or went back to their original towns. So not all of them are uneducated. A lot of them are educated people that do appreciate their culture, appreciate their traditions, and are very traditional. So they had to find a way to incorporate those two together. There's so much potential there. There's so much knowledge that is not being used within the community.
Yeah. I find it interesting that you emphasize that they're like educated, because I think it's interesting that there are traditional healers that will have this like conventional Western education that is probably very recognized by the West, and they can be like, yeah, biomedicine, yeah, we know these things. And yet they're also able to balance that out with the traditional knowledge. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's I think that's a strength. That's actually
it is. That's an example of like kind of what we want.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about like different ways we can actually, start to formalize traditional medicine, different approaches that we see problematic or not. But I was just wondering if we can maybe dive into a little bit about what's our potential, what are they traditional, health practices that could be negative? Because we can think of traditional medicine maybe in three ways. We have those maybe practices that we have where it's like, it's based on some beliefs, but it's not formalized. There's no scientific evidence, but no one can say that it improves health or it, makes it better. There's no evidence for that. So let's say like chicken noodle soup or something. We all have, we drink, not drink. Sometimes when you have a common cold or whatever, you oh yeah, I just have chicken noodle soup. You know what I mean? So you have your chicken noodle soup, you probably start to feel better, but it's like, can we really say it's chicken noodle soup that helps with your common cold? Yes, you put in vegetables in your chicken noodle soup, they have vitamin C and they can help your immunity. So yes, it's just based on the belief, but we actually see that it improves your health.
Mm-hmm.
But do we have some maybe practices where it's based on beliefs, it's based on some cultural practices, and it can actually have negative health consequences?
I have so much to say about this. So Loza, I don't know if you want to go first. But...
Yes. I mean, simply said yes. And I think that was initially why I was very against alternative medicine. I was with that definition of there's medicine that works and medicine that doesn't work. And most of the time, the ones that don't work is traditional, because growing up in Ethiopia, I mean, we have traditional medicines that we know we work, but my parents knew a lot of people in their community that were harmed because they only sought traditional medicine and not conventional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, either they died from their disease that progressed, a lot of the times it was like things like HIV and stuff, or they died from the treatment itself. So, and I think that's why it's important to kind of combine the two and maybe not rely on one. So there can be instances where it's harmful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I have kind of two different thoughts, right? Number one, tradition is beautiful. Traditional medicine is beautiful, right? But a lot of traditions come from stereotypes, come from oppression. We have to admit it, we have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional practices, traditional medicine practices, and health practices do stem from stereotypes that have been used to oppress, I don't know, the vulnerables like pregnant women, young women, adolescent girls, children, even children. So yes, it can be harmful, particularly if I think when it's used, I think initially it's very important that we ask ourselves why it is being used, why it is being incorporated.
Yeah.
So yeah, then my second thought was around, yes, incorporating the two. Like you can't, traditional medicine can only get you so far.
Mm-hmm.
You can't cure cancer by just going to your healer and just saying, oh yeah, you happen to get better, but you don't know if it's the medicine that did it for you. So that's why it's very, very important for us to standardize these methods and kind of bring the two methods together. It doesn't have to be one separating the other or a competition or I don't know. It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah.
You know? So you can't just say, oh, I'm gonna go to my healer. I'm saying it because I've seen it happen to people that they refuse to go to the hospital and they just decided to rely on traditional medicine and they had very, very bad health outcomes, including death.
Yes.
So I think we have to be careful about how we pass this message. I'm
not absolutely
only rely on traditional medicine. No, please still seek a healthcare professional, a medical professional.
Yes, and for me, the example that I can draw upon, without naming names, for example, in Zimbabwe, there is a religion, shall we say, that a religious group, and they are very much against people who are within that group going to seek like medical attention, like, going to a hospital and all these different things. And it is known that, for example, when a woman is pregnant, they don't go give birth in a hospital in like a sanitized, our normal hospital settings. They give birth in their community there amongst the religious group, they are attended by someone. We don't know if that person has training, or we don't know if they just have this more traditional birth attendant kind of, training that they have within that community. But then it's again this idea that even in that group, it's frowned upon. Like their belief around health and maybe health systems and hospitals is now leading women to just giving birth in settings that we have no idea what it is like. And we know that that can now result in infections. We don't know like what's the environment the baby is being born into. That can result in complications. So if complications happen, can the birth attendant actually deal with those complications fast enough? And like Jocelyn said, sometimes there are cases of where people actually die.
Yeah.
So this is where we also need to consider practices, like what's behind these practices, because they can be around health, but some of them are just based on like beliefs, whether it's just religious or just based on oral tradition. We don't
Peer pressure from the ancestors.
Peer pressure from the ancestors.
That's what I
Yeah.
And also, I'm sorry. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. I mentioned earlier witchcraft, magic. It's a harmful consequence. I'm sorry, people are dying out there.
Yeah.
People are being spiritually and mentally extorted and abused.
Yeah.
Through traditional medicine.
Yeah, I mean, we have to even acknowledge that, like, some, again, traditional medicine is such a big umbrella, but like some of them is, they believe children, body parts of children have medicinal properties. Body parts of virgins have medicinal properties. So people are getting killed, people are getting trafficked. So we can't ignore it. And we have to, at the end of the day, when it comes to medicine and medical practices, is do no harm. So when we talk about incorporating traditional medicine, you have to consider, is this doing harm? And so then, you're gonna disrupt it.
That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do no harm. We're not saying that we're not, because I want to be careful about how I send this message. Because some people or people that are more traditional may listen to this and think, oh, maybe we're criticizing or we're being ignorant about some of these practices. No, we're simply saying that you have to make sure that the reason behind what you're doing and what you're actually doing is not harmful.
Exactly.
Not mentally, not physically, not spiritually, not emotionally. That's very, very important. I don't care if your ancestors did it, whoever did it, at some point, traditions, it may be a tradition. It's a tradition, but traditions, it's okay for it to change, because traditions have not always been helpful.
Traditions can evolve. They've always been evolving. It's okay to change.
There's some things that used to be completely problematic and impossible. At some point, slavery was a tradition. At some point, slavery was absolutely normal. But today, we're in a different, obviously there's still some issues, colonial remnants of these issues, but once upon a time, it was a completely normal thing. So you really have to open your mind and think, these traditions, we have to reevaluate them, we have to reassess them.
Yeah, there's a particular, practice, I'm sure we're all thinking about it. I didn't want to bring it up, but you know what, we're just here. So, because, you mentioned the whole idea of do no harm. And I was coming across female genital mutilation, right? We know that is a common practice. It is just a cultural practice in many different countries.
Yeah.
Right? And what I was hearing is that over time, they obviously, what's associated with female genital mutilation is that there can be health complications. We're not saying it's done for health reasons necessarily, but there can be complications when, in terms of like, women or girls who undergo FGM can bleed out a lot. They can have hemorrhaging. They can be at risk of infections and sometimes specifically HIV. So there are serious health consequences to genital mutilation.
Yeah.
And one approach they've tried to do this is to say, okay, instead of us having FGM being performed by people who may not be trained, let's have healthcare professionals perform FGM.
Yeah.
And so this links back to the thing of like, it's now being performed by healthcare professionals. But we don't necessarily.
Modern medicine?
Is it modern medicine? Number one. Number two, is it beneficial for your patient? Because you're meant to do no harm.
Yeah.
But when you perform it,
Okay, why are we being nice? It's not.
Well, yeah, no, ultimately it's not. And so let me just say this. Okay, maybe that woman might not be and she's not gonna maybe not bleed out because it's the doctor that did it, or she might not get HIV, but there's complications that come after that. Giving birth is way more dangerous for women that went through FGM, as if giving birth wasn't dangerous enough. There's mental issues. I mean, like, usually these are children that go under it, they don't really consent. So there's mental health issues that they go through in the future. So no, it's not beneficial, or it's not acceptable. Because
that makes me go back using this FGM example. Some people have used some very, very, very silly justifications. Aside from, she must get married, she must not have sex. Aside from those ones, which are absolutely absurd, some people have said, oh yeah, males get circumcised, so women can get circumcised too.
It's an equality, just this one time.
Yeah.
This is why research is important.
Yeah.
It's a very basic but very, very important idea, right? Research is very important, even for our traditional practices. You may not have internet, or you may not always have the facilities that you need, but find out from other professionals, find out from other people in your area. Even beyond that, try to reach out to people. It is your duty. You can't use the excuse that, oh, it's our practice, it's our whatever. No, I'm speaking directly to these people.
Yeah, if you're listening, listen.
You're listening, you know who you are. It is your duty. So please do your research properly, because you could potentially ruin and harm a woman's life forever.
Yeah, no, like, people die from this practice. It's not a small little joke.
Yeah, it's no longer just a simple, it's just for our culture.
It's our culture. How's your culture killing someone?
Your culture's killing someone. Did the woman even consent to do this? Like, what is this idea based on? Like Jocelyn, you said, sometimes the reasoning for FGM is like for the benefit of the man. This whole idea of like making the woman a bit more pure to maintain her moral dignity or something like this. Like, when did we decide that's what moral dignity was about? You know? Yeah, guys.
Forever.
But in any case,
we know where we stand with that one, but
we know where we stand with that one. And we're just saying, just to note.
Yeah.
So I think it's time for us to just wrap this up. I just wanted to end by, asking you guys, like, what is your key takeaway from this whole discussion in terms of like way forward? Like, what do you think we should be considering when we want to formalize traditional medicine? We've touched on all kinds of things, from like regulations, from the history of it all and having to consider that. We've touched on how best we can maybe try to, get these two sides talking together, the traditional medicine and then the conventional modern medicine. So what are your key takeaways?
For me, I'm going to make it very simple. We've addressed them quite a lot throughout the episode. 3 key things: the why, the how, the where. The why, before we even consider standardizing a traditional practice, let's assess the problem, why we're doing it. That's a very, very important first step. Now, this may be a scientific method, you may call it that, but I'm going to include it here, the why, because some of these methods sometimes can stem from stereotypes and historic oppression. So the why. And the second, the how. So if you're going to do something, have a traditional practice, yes, integrate it with conventional medicine, that's great, but also documenting how it's being done. You could share it with your other traditional healers. You could share it with, different people, your patients, so that they can also go ahead and, review it for themselves. But it's important to document it. How you want to document it, that's up to you. Obviously, we're not going to tell you how to do that. We're not experts, but these are just ideas, right? Just speculating. And then the where. Now, that again, cleanliness, disinfection, all these different things are very, very important when it comes to medicine, because you may recommend a plant, but then you don't clean it properly, then you get an infection. So the where is very important. Having a clean practice, a clean traditional practice, a clean place, even where your patients can come into. And also when they go home and they practice what you've told them, they're able to do it in a very, very a safe way. Yeah. Yeah, I have more to add, but I'll let you guys.
Yeah, Loza, what's your key takeaway, your key message?
Okay, my takeaway, I mean, there's a lot, but I like, okay, so you addressed more towards the traditional practitioners. I want to talk to the Europeans of the other people. No, I'm gonna keep it short, I'm gonna keep it simple. But I just want to say, like, I want everyone to get into their heads that European systems of knowledge are not the golden standard. They're not always the superior ones, as we have often been taught, because whenever, I mean, even recently when I started my global health semester 2 course, we're learning about, types of medicines, and they said Western medicine, in brackets, modern medicine, what makes that modern and the rest of us primitive. So I just want everyone to understand that our knowledge systems are also not primitive, they're valid, and they should be given the same consideration, the same respect. There are like some things that are, considered modern medicine now, we've been practicing centuries and millennia ago. You said aspirin. Nubia they've been using tetracycline, which I'm taking right now for my acne, but it's being used centuries ago. So like, I think it's just important to understand, y'all not the golden standards, y'all not the only owners of knowledge. There are valid systems elsewhere that can benefit you as well.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to say about them.
Yeah, if I was just, you guys have made excellent points there, and I think you summarized it very well. To me, my key takeaway is, again, like we're saying, there's value to modern medicine and we appreciate how far we've come with it. But we also still need to recognize that there's value in the traditional medicine, no matter what your views of it may be. Where is there evidence? Is there not enough evidence? But there's clearly value. And I think I agree with Loza here that the history of it all and colonization have like really made it that, the Western stuff is what is valued the most. And then all this non-ethnic, I don't know what they're doing over there, like less value. I think, like, I agree with you, Loza, there should be balance there.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the approach.
Yeah.
I think it's about the approach. Again, it's like, yes, we see that we may want to like marry these two sides, but we need to do it in a way that's actually, is not again reinforcing colonial thinking. We're not just saying, hey, you traditional healers, you need to do A, B, C, D.
Come catch up with us.
Come catch up with us. You know what I mean? Again, have that equal balance.
Equal balance.
Yeah.
And there's one more thing that came to my mind. I want to also speak to the people that value traditional healing and that value herbal medicine. I think a lot of them really, 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 really love the traditional medicine. Like they really, in fact, they will go against the whole healthcare system.
Oh Lord.
So I completely understand that you have had good experiences with it, but please, I've said it before, it may sound repetitive, but do your research, go seek actual medical professionals that will help you, but also understand that there are limitations to the help that you're receiving and that you're potentially harming yourself and the health of other people.
Absolutely.
So, my fellow, I don't know, with acupuncture, lovely globies, traditional people, whether you're traditional, westernized, modern, whatever you call yourself. We love you, we appreciate you, but we need to find a way to incorporate and become global.
Use all your resources, like all resources available to you. Don't limit yourself to one school of thought.
100%. And that goes on both sides. Like, if you're used to the Western approach, like there's nothing wrong with trying to explore the more herbal and the non-conventional, but again, like Justin said, use reliable sources. You're coming from the side of majority of the time you're relying on traditional medicine or even just like home remedies. You can still also find reliable sources. You can talk to a professional just to see their perspective as well.
Exactly.
And with that, I guess we finished up. I think there's so much more we can say about traditional health. So there'll probably be a part 2. We haven't even
I think there needs to be part 2s for so many episodes.
We haven't even touched on Big Pharma and their whole role in this. Anyway,
Be
Globy,
continued.
I've been Edna.
You've been Edna. I've been Loza.
And I'm Justin. I have not been.
She said, I have not been. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the World Health Investigation podcast. Follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button.
That's a bit shy.
Expressions. If you want to see our facial expressions and how we're mocking some of these ideas, yeah, go subscribe right now.
Immediately, I want to see you do it actually. Or here, I want to hear the click.
Subscribe right now or I'm done.
You know she's sick too, so she might die.
But I am not feeling very well today, but I came here for my fellow group. So you better subscribe. Okay, please.
Wait, this is getting a bit deep.
Hey, okay, I think they subscribed.
I think it's subscribed.
I think they have by now.
Anyway, thanks for listening, you guys. Catch you in the next one.